So I want to present one of Venturi's key ideas, which is the duck and the decorated shed. And just to get a little bit ahead, Venturi is usually, they're both valid, but he's usually for the decorated shed and against the duck. So what is a duck and what is a decorated shed? Adopts the duck concept. A duck is when the shape and form of the building present its nature. So let's jump to a decorated shed as an alternative. In a decorated shed, you build a serviceable building and then you put a facade on it so that the building is not disrupted by the architecture. The architecture is just the facade. So he says, if you want people to know that your building's a monument, put a sign on it that says, I am a monument, and everybody will know. Where did we see that before in Venturi's work? And the fire station. How do you know it's a fire station? There's a sign on it that says fire station. And we'll look at that in some detail. So, and he says there are two kinds of decorated sheds, A and B. So in one type, the sign is attached to the building, but if the building is set back from the road, and you won't be able to see it very well because you're experiencing it from the highway, you can remove the sign from the building and put it out as an independent site near the curb. So that's your A and B type of decorated sheds. In a duck, the shape of the building, what the building is about is communicated by its shape. Now, Venturi's criticism is going to be that doing that can distort the function of the building. You get so tied up in doing the architecture, you screw up functions of the building. So we'll see how he presents that idea. This is a building called the Portland Building by, anybody know who the architect is? Michael Graves, who died a few years ago. He was one of the, in the 70s, there was a group called the New York Five, which was Eisenman, Graves, Gwathmey, Haydak, and Richard Meyer. And so Michael Graves is originally one of them, although they split into different directions. So this is the Portland Building. There was a competition, and he won the competition. Why do you think he might have won the competition? You could not make a simpler, cheaper building. It's a box. It's a cube. There's, every time you put an articulation or a bump in a building, you up the budget. He doesn't have any. Yeah, now I'm going to exaggerate. But the architecture is just paint. Now, it's actually changing in the materials, but it's only on the skin. So this is a decorated shed. You make a serviceable building, and then you apply the architecture, which in the case of Michael Graves is neoclassical postmodernism. This is looking like a Roman keystone in an arch, and these are sort of like classical columns with capitals, is applied like a suit of clothes. Venturi's own ultimate expression of this, that we'll look at again, is the competition entry for the Football Hall of Fame. And the highway is out here, 3/4 of a mile away, Jersey Turnpike, and you're zipping along at 70 miles an hour. What can he do to this building to make it stand out? And the answer is he can't. You can put all the Corbeau brise soleils and concrete forms on there. You're not going to see it from 3/4 of a mile away. What has been developed to be visible from the highway? We know how to do that. It's called a billboard. So this is called the Billboard Building, and we'll go into it a little more. But he sticks a billboard on the front. Now you'll be able to see it. Now, don't hesitate to say, I don't think this is valid architecture. If you don't like it, fine. I'm just, presenting it, and hopefully you appreciate that there's some humor here. Now, dock and decorated shed. And Venturi's point is, he didn't make this up. This has been in architecture since the beginning. So one of the first examples of monumental architecture is the step pyramid of Saqqara around 2500 BC. And what do we have? The pyramid, which is a duck. It's in the shape to do its function of bringing spiritual energy down to the earth. And then in the walls surrounding it are fake temple fronts. So this is they alternate from Upper and Lower Egypt. And there's nothing behind them. They're just stuck on the wall. So they are decorated sheds. If we look at a Gothic cathedral, here's the wall with the temple fronts. It's just a wall, and these are just symbolic. If we look at a Gothic cathedral, the front is a decorated shed. It's stuck on. It doesn't really relate to what's going on behind it. The back is a duck. The aesthetic comes from a revelation of the structure. So this idea of duck and decorated shed have very long traditions. Modern architecture had tended to say either your form comes from the function or it's not valid. Well, yeah, you can say 2/3 of architectural history is not valid, or you can say, well, what were they doing? Maybe we don't want to do that today. I mean, maybe Venturi does, but we don't. But, we should recognize what, in fact, was going on. Who can tell me what this building is? Okay, I got to put labels on these. This is Paul Rudolph, Art and Architecture Building at Yale. Venturi, this looks a little bit like Rudolph. And in talking about this, we're going to see yet in another example as well. Venturi picks on Paul Rudolph. So Paul Rudolph was one of the maybe, 5, 6 most important architects of the late 60s. Maybe we can say he's trying to out-Corbu. So he's got all these forms and this musculature, bush-hammered concrete, and the aesthetic is not stuck on. These are stairs, these are ducts. He's got all this stuff going on is coming from functions of the building, and maybe he's even distorting those functions of the building to get the architectural effects. And we'll see that right here. So, this is by Venturi. It's called the Guild House. It's low-income housing in Philadelphia from the 1960s. And around the same time, this is Crawford Manor in New Haven, a couple blocks from Yale, by Paul Rudolph. So let's see how these buildings differ. Rudolph is doing capital A architecture. He's got forms, he's got concrete, he's got articulation. It's actually a concrete block and not put-in-place concrete. So this looks very architectural. This is looking like a hack architecture doing low-income housing. And Venturi says, right, this is low-budget, low-income housing. This is what you get. As we look at this, we realize there's actually a lot going on here. But before we do that, let's look at the plans. Look at all this rich form articulation that Rudolph gives us. How do we get that? Well, we put the kitchen on the outside wall. That gives us a form. That's a lot of fun. You go into the kitchen in the middle of the winter at 6 in the morning, and it's going to be freezing. Then he's got a closet in the outside wall. Well, wouldn't it have been nice to have a window there? Oh, but the closet gives him this vertical form. Then he's got these balconies, which nobody ever uses. That gives him all the bumps. And then let's look at his apartment layout. You come into your apartment, what's the first thing you do? You dump your groceries in the kitchen. You come into your apartment, you got to go all the way here to get to the kitchen to dump your groceries. And you're circulating against this wall. You circulate against this wall to get to the bedroom. This is the only piece of wall, and the closet opens here. There's no place to put your furniture. This is a really poor apartment layout, but he distorts the layout in order to get these effects. Now let's look at Venturi's. We come in here, here's the kitchen, here's the living room, here's the bedroom. The bedroom shares a bathroom right off the living room. So it's very efficiently laid out. It's not doing any architectural acrobatics. He's just giving you a well laid out apartment. And okay, well, any hack public housing architect can do that. Where's the architecture? Why is this important? What's Venturi doing? Well, first we're making references to Palladio with an arched window from the Villa Malcontenta. Then we are making monumental scale to the entrance. So this all works together. We've got a sign here to tell us what it is, the Guild House. We've got 1% for art. So we spend that on glazed white brick, which ends here because that's when the money runs out. And then also here is a huge 5 foot in diameter granite, solid piece of granite. That's our art. As you come in, you can rub your hand on that. It's really cool. And then he gives the building a capital. He puts a course of white brick here, which makes it from here up to be capital. So it's rich with architectural references. The windows are conventional double-hung windows, but they're too big. So it's the ordinary slightly out of scale. So he's playing all these games. And then, you can't really see it here, but what do old people do? They watch television. So there's a gold anodized TV antenna here, totally fake. It's in the back there's a real antenna. Of course today you'd have cable, but behind here where you don't see it as a real antenna, this is just an announcement that this is, television is important. This is the community room where you can watch TV with your neighbors. So Venturi says, this is a decorated shed, this is a duck. The ultimate Venturi decorated shed building is the Football Hall of Fame. He enters the competition, does not win. He said, let's make, first of all, it's a football museum. What do you look at in a museum, a football museum? You want to see the deflated football from the 1947 Princeton Penn game? You know, a 50-year-old football? What is it? Well, what you want to see is the plays. So he makes a huge, giant TV on the facade, and you can see the plays. Now, that was not possible in 1967. It's totally doable today. And then inside, and he tells us this is a billboard. The facade is separate from the building. We see the back looking just like a billboard. And inside, yeah, we have some display cases, but mostly we have projected onto the walls footage of the games. We looked at this before. This is Fire Station number 4, Columbus, Indiana. And let's, 1968, let's again say, well, this is probably a decorated shed. Let's look at a duck fireplace. So, just a couple years earlier, 1962, this is Peter Millard's firm, the New Haven Central Fire Station. What is that? It's heroic. It's throwing the forms around. It's you know, out corbuing corbu. It's got. So you're living in this neighborhood and you've got this 60-foot tall blank concrete wall. Well, that's cool. But it's got all the forms. You know, it's all heroic. So Venturi says, this is, we don't know it's a fire station. It's not anything the community can relate to. What the hell is this about? So this is Peter Millard's decorated shed. Let me get okay, so let's look at what Venturi does. First of all, he wants to tell us that it's a fire station. So how do we know it's a fire station?
It says fire station.
Right. And what makes it a fire station? It's got fire truck. So he puts a glass garage door here so we can see the fire truck. And it's either a fire station or some other civic building because it's got an American flag. And then finally, as you pointed out, if we miss all the other indications, we're told right here it's fire station. Okay, but where's the architecture? Aha. So, number one, we've got simple, clear function. There are 3 parts to a fire station. There's the fire truck in the garage. There's where the firemen hang out waiting for the alarm. And there's the tower. Yeah, thanks. I'd like it to be, I mean, it might be nice to have it open at the moment, but what if it's cold next week? Look, right there, left.
It's cold next week.
Okay, thanks. Now I know how to jiggle it. Could you open it about 6 inches? Hang on. Here's a, oh, it's open, thanks. Great. Thank you. So after the fire, you hang the fire hose in here over a bar, and it drips dry. Now, how do we know that this is where the firemen live? Because that's the window pattern from Venturi's mother's house. Now, nobody's going to know that, but it's like, it's just filled with these inside jokes, these little fun references. And then again, in a public building, typically 1% of the budget's supposed to go for art, so you make put up a stupid sculpture out here. Instead, he says, I'm going to spend the money on luxurious white glazed brick, but then the budget ran out. Now, if you want to get into this building, there is a lot going on. And I'm doing an analysis of the facade imagery of the building. You could also look at the plan. And we did the same thing with Venturi's mother's house. The plan's important. He talks about it in his book, Complexity and Contradiction, but I'm not going into that. So here's our 1% for the art. Now, I think it's null. Let me just see if I've got it on the slide. Yes, null. So null has Venturi do some furniture, some chairs. This chair is really simple. Look, we have one piece for the back and rear legs, bent plywood, one piece for the seat and front legs. That's it. So, where's the architecture? Where's the character of the chair? Well, you put it on with paint. So he does this whole set of chairs. There's American Gothic, here's Gumby, cartoon character. Each of these is a reference to some, this is Neo-Egyptian, a reference to some decorative tradition. Now, what do I mean by these are decorated sheds. By decorated shed, we mean we make a simple, direct, serviceable form that fulfills the needed function, and then we apply the decoration. As opposed to, this is classic modern furniture. Can anybody tell me who the designers are? Marcel Breuer, Cheska chair, time of the Bauhaus. This one? Correct, Charles Eames. This one? Correct, Mies van der Rohe Barcelona chair. And this one? Corbeau. And this thing can slide to change your angle. So, what is the source of the aesthetic of these chairs? And the answer is an expression of the design form comes from the materials and the functions. So, in the Cheska chair, we have this high-strength steel tubing. Now, why is there no leg here? There's a tremendous bending moment here when you sit on this chair. Why isn't there, just put a leg here? Because this is a spring, and when you sit on it, it'll have a little bit of bounce. You want to sit down thud. That's, in the past, chairs were stuffed with stuffing so that would give. Here he's using the springy quality of the high-strength steel to get that spring. Now, this is metal, but every surface you touch is natural, either wood or rattan, which is woven reed. Same thing over here. We've got bent plywood, this modern, at the time, sort of high-tech material. And then what you sit on is very comfortable, soft leather. Here, Mies. Again, there's no support here, so that when you sit down, there can be a little bit of springy bounce here. And this is chrome plated, actually, originally. But what you touch is leather, natural material. Breathes, feels comfortable for your body. So the aesthetic of these chairs is coming from their materials and their functions. The aesthetic of Venturi's chair is painted on. This is a decorated shed. These are ducks. So this is a duck. This is decorated sheds. I'm sorry. This is duck. This is decorated shed. So both Kahn and Venturi are didactic architects. What does didactic mean? Teaching. So the buildings are, yes, stand on their own and are excellent or not. But in addition, each of their buildings is meant to convey a certain attitude, approach to architecture. So the attitude is here, architectural basics. Duck and decorated shed are the most fundamental two forms of architecture, going all the way back in history. Okay, this is the Tubrick and Wislowski houses, Nantucket, 1970. Presumably. So, what might Mies van der Rohe have done? Mies only does one thing. Glass box, right? What would Corbu have done? Concrete box. If you were not, and actually, let me jump ahead. I know Venturi's work pretty well, and a friend has us out to visit in Block Island, and we're walking along the beach down below. She points up, and there are a bunch of new houses under construction up on this hill, and she says, which are by the Venturi houses? I got it wrong. In other words, as soon as she pointed out, I said, oh, okay, I get it. But the point here is that these look like Nantucket houses. They're New England wood houses like you build on Nantucket. But they're filled with all kinds of architectural references. We've got Palladian window. This one is big and generous, so we can afford to cut away the corner. This one is tighter. This one is so tight that the window is jammed up into the roof. This window projects out into the porch. Just all these little games going on. And in plan, my apologies for this. I've got to redo this slide so you can see these guys. But they are very simple, clear plans. This is a Petrie House in Wainscott, New York. And would you know this is by a famous architect? Looks like a Dutch roof suburban home. But he makes the moldings a little bit more bold. The windows are a little bit large. All these references. But this is suburban New York. Now we're in Bermuda. And these are, this pyramidal form, these porches are what you see in Bermuda. Now if we look here, there are columns here, but these columns, you can barely see it, are flat with a fin going back this way, and then it's just a flat cutout of the Capitol up there. Concept addressed. Regional context, whereas Mies would have made glass box, glass box, glass box, glass box. Each of these responds to the tradition where it's built. And now, songs. Two most important books by Venturi are Complexity and Contradiction in Architecture by Venturi, and then a book called Learning from Las Vegas, which is by Venturi, Scott Brown, and Steve Eisenhower. And after leaving teaching at the University of Pennsylvania, Venturi went off to teach at Yale, and I think he only taught 1 year there. But what they did is they took the entire class and they went to Las Vegas. And they said, in the old days you'd go to Rome, today we go to Las Vegas. Now, what is attractive about Las Vegas? So first thing to know is that the Las Vegas they were engaged with is not today's Las Vegas. So all these signs, that this is one of the most famous signs, they're all gone. And we have these new super hotels today. The Las Vegas Venturi is writing about. This is Las Vegas today. It's a whole other scale. And what they do is they say, okay, Las Vegas is the only American city, or the first American city, to have started from scratch after the era of electricity and the automobile. So, what is this over here? That's a pipe for the gas jet. This building was built before electricity. The lighting was done with gas. And then that road outside the window, that was for horses. This building was built before they had automobiles. There were horses out there. Buildings built in the 1880s. So, New York, we have fit electricity and the automobile into an earlier city. But Las Vegas was built after all that was invented. So he says, we look at the Noli map of Rome and we see the forms, the buildings, the outside spaces. Let's do that kind of analysis of Las Vegas. So this is what's called the Strip. It's where the major casinos were back in the 70s until all this new stuff was built. What do we have? We have the road, then we've got the road, then we've got parking lot, then we've got the casino, which is one story, then we've got the hotel. So if you said, well, okay, I want my casino to be distinctive, so I'm going to do something with the facade of this building. Well, somebody's here in their car. Can they see that far? Are they going to notice anything? So, you want to announce your brand. How do you do it? Yeah, you take the imagery off the facade of the building and put it as a sign right next to the road so that no one's going to miss it. This is Stardust. Well, way back here is the casino and then the hotel, but you can't miss that. And it's, anybody familiar with this image? Well, until a few years ago, everybody knew that image. It was just a real icon, like the McDonald's arches. So he's doing an analysis of the relationship between highway, sign, parking, casino, hotel. And in each case, how is that working? And from that, so the book is not called Las Vegas is Stupid and Cool and We Should Imitate It. The book is called Learning from Las Vegas. What can we learn from it? And Las Vegas works with an understanding of the movement of the automobile. Venturi likes to say, okay, there's a book by Camillo Sitte on the Renaissance Square. And this is wonderful and proportional and human, and these Renaissance cities are wonderful that they have these squares. What's the problem? They're for pedestrian cities from the 1400s. We experience a city, New York's an exception. New York's very pedestrian. But most cities in the United States, you're in an automobile. So, Venturi says, let's look at some different circumstances. So we're in an Eastern bazaar, and let's look at sign, symbol, building, and the relationship of one to another. So we're in an Eastern bazaar, we're walking along, and we come to Abdullah's sandal shop. How do we know that this is Abdullah's sandal shop? There's a rug in front with sandals on it. We don't need a sign. All we have is a building and the rug with the sandals. Now we're in a medieval street with Ye Olde Tavern and Ye Olde Silversmith. So we've got all the buildings look the same. They're tiny little windows because they lose heat and glass is expensive. So how do we know which one is the tavern and which one is the silversmith? There's a sign. Now we come to Main Street in a small town, USA. Instead of, we can either be walking at 3 miles an hour or driving at 20 miles an hour. How do we know that this is a shoe store? Not the sign, but shoe stores always have huge glass that then goes inward to the door with the men's shoes on one side and the women's shoes on the other side. Now we get to the commercial strip. This would be like Route 9 in New Jersey, where the Jiffy Lube is, and the rug store, and the Walmart, and etc. And here, the sign and the symbol are important. Then we get to the Las Vegas Strip. The signs and symbols are huge. And then we get to a shopping center. There's a little sign out on the highway that says Danbury Mall. And then we come in, and how do we know that this store is the Gap? Not by the sign, but again by what's in the window. The right way to arrange this stuff, to do the architectural expression, is dependent on these circumstances. Are you a pedestrian going 3 miles an hour, in a car going 20 miles an hour, in a car going 50 miles an hour? So Venturi then gets a commission to do signs for a real estate developer. The land is just blank, but they're taking you there to buy a lot. And this is where, the Holiday Inn's going to be. This is where the grocery store is going to be. So he makes a set of signs that show what's going to be there. And why does the sign look this way? Remember that Stardust sign? This is a heraldic device. This is the marquee. The answer is, from a distance, we recognize the heraldic device. Oh yeah, that's Stardust, or that's Caesar's Palace. Then when we get closer, we can read the sign. Like in Las Vegas, it's going to say, Debbie Reynolds performing at Stardust. And the sign has to be down low because now the roof of your car is cutting off anything above that. So this sign is based on perception from the automobile. What is the role of the automobile in our architecture? Another project with signs. 1976 was the bicentennial of the United States. So 1776 is the Declaration of Independence, so now it's 200 years. And it was supposed to be a big World's Fair, and it never happened. But Venturi, a bunch of architects did proposals. Venturi's proposals was to make a transportation corridor in the center with trams and etc., and then have huge signs across here announcing where you are. For Philadelphia, he did a proposal for, at the end of the Ben Franklin Parkway, there would be a light show at the museum with Ben Franklin projected up here. And also in Philadelphia, this is where Ben Franklin's home was. So here on the street was Ben Franklin's printing office. And they said, well, it was all gone. All I have is footings. So they rebuilt this the way they think it would have looked. But they said, for Ben Franklin's house, we don't want to do that. We don't want to say to people, this is Ben Franklin's house when it's not. So let's make a sketch of it. So how do you make a sketch in 3 dimensions? And the answer is 1 foot square stainless steel tubing, making a rough sketch of the house. Also around that time, he does an exhibit called Signs and Symbols in the American City. Part 1 was the home. And he did 3 houses. So this is a giant photo mural, 20-foot high hanging mural of where might this house be? Who might live here? I would say upper class professionals, might be a lawyer, might be a government functionary. And this is a colonial Palladian style. In the living room, what do we observe here? What is absent? No TV, real antiques they've collected carefully over time, Currier and Ives prints, no sidewalk. You walk your dog along the... Next one in the exhibit is a Levittown suburban home. So the key room is not the living room, but the den. We've got a TV here. These people have children. Here's the sidewalk. Here's the kids' toys. The car is out front, announcing our status. And architecture is not random. Everything here is symbolic of something. This is very comfortable. Sitting on the sofa, you can put your feet up on this pine table. You would not put your feet up on this thing. And this is where Venturi grew up. So this is a South Philadelphia row house in an Italian neighborhood. The whole symbol system is now flattened down to a flat facade. And inside we have this huge TV, very elaborate curtains. What's missing right here? Anybody know this home? The plastic seat covers. Now, what Venturi is saying is, one of these is not superior to another. They are each expressive of different cultural classes. We're not even sure what the economics might be, but different culturally. And I added one more. So this is a house, a loft of a New York professional, upper middle class art collector. Here's our Frank Stella, our Donald Judd, our white leather furniture, our Corbu balcony. And here is this person when they're just got out of school. So they couldn't afford this yet. So they had their Broya Cheska chairs, their Museum of Modern Art calendar, their butcher block table and shelves, etc. So the point that Venturi is making is this is our taste, maybe, as architects, but it is not superior to this or this or this. It's a different cultural point of view. So, respect for different cultural classes. Around this time, he does a major study, never got published as a book, but a major study of American suburban landscape and all the signs and symbols in a community. The different elements of suburban space communicate their symbolic message at different scales. So, down the street, Levittown always has slightly curved streets so that they don't look monotonous. In front, we have our big lawn. In the back, we have a barbecue pit, but in the front, we've got, we put our formal self forward, and he looks at all the different meanings of this face we put to the street, to other members of our community, from photographs, from magazine covers, etc. And then from the curb working inward, we've got our, put the automobile in front, etc. And at the door stoop, how do we know these people are Republicans? They've got an eagle over the doorway. So people are projecting their cultural sense of themselves. And then in the backyard, you can let it hang out. You can be informal, you're wearing your sweatsuit, etc. So, understanding of reality as it is. In other words, usually in our design education, we're told, oh, suburbia is evil and wasteful, it shouldn't be. Well, it is. So how about starting by understanding it? And finally, as part of that exhibit, he looks at signs, some classic signs, McDonald's, Mobile, etc. So, celebration of signs, finding signs in architectural traditions, including modernism, confronting commercialism, confronting it, not avoiding it, and recognition of good design without fashion bias.